my friend April absolutely rocks. I give an enormous amount of credit to my aunt and uncle, and then my aunt Carolyn, who has always been like a second mom. She, sorry, I didn't expect to get so emotional.
Welcome to the Resilience Reborn podcast. We are your hosts, Angie
and Trey Easley. Each episode, we bring you powerful stories of people who have faced unimaginable challenges and emerged stronger.
We'll find hope together, one story at a time. Now, let's dive in. Hi, and welcome to Resilience Reborn. I'm Angie Easley. Today, I have the honor of having my awesome, most amazing friend, Davina Gunther, on with us today. Hi, Davina. How are you?
Hey, Angie. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm so glad that you could be here with me today for our episode. If you would just kind of give us a rundown of who you are, a little bit of your background first.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I am so excited for this.
Me too. Well, like you said, my name is Davina Gunther, and I was a teacher for 15 years, middle and high school. And I left the classroom to take care of my kids. I have been married for 15 years, and I'm the mom of two amazingly wild little boys.
Yes, that's true.
Well, not so little, I guess. One is 13 next week, and then the youngest is 7. And I've been a friend of the host for 26 years.
Yeah, since college. So, however, yeah.
97. I can't math, but that was 1997. And, I am on what I like to call my second act right now. Not to be my last, for sure. But both of my kids have autism. And the youngest one is nonverbal, well, minimally verbal, emerging, thankfully.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I left the classroom after the death of my parents to take care of him, and because he needed more care than I could give him working full time.
You're a music teacher.
Yes. Oh, yes. Choir teacher.
Yeah.
And so currently I'm a stay-at-home mom, but I'm also a special needs advocate. And I have started a mom group, support group for moms that have kids with neurodivergency or autism, specifically in this particular case. And I'm a professional taxi driver to all the therapies.
Yes. Oh.
My husband and I joke that if our kids played travel ball, it'd be like travel therapy.
Oh my gosh, I don't know how can you add one more thing in?
Oh, right. Yeah. So, and I am currently cooking up some other community opportunities for moms right now. So, but I don't want to say.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's really awesome.
That's under wraps for right now. I'll tell you after we record.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Once again, thanks for being here. This is going to be a really awesome episode for all of you listening and watching. Davina has been through a lot of life-changing adversities. She has dealt with a lot of trauma, and this stems back to even when she was a little girl too. There's no way that we'll be able to touch on everything in this one episode. So maybe we'll dive in a little bit here today, and then later on, maybe you can come back and we can do something on a different topic. But the first question that I want to just ask is just share your story with us, especially the moment you learned about the sudden loss of your first parent, which was your dad, and how that impacted you at that time.
Okay. So my dad was my hero, and just like this, he was the strongest guy ever, hard worker, never got sick, stuff like that. He rarely missed, I don't know. Sorry, I'm nervous. Okay. Edit that out. All right. So I was at school and I got a phone call because my dad was supposed to have gallbladder surgery that day. He had been having trouble eating and swallowing and being sick anytime food was involved for quite a while. And he had gone from doctor to doctor to doctor. And finally, somebody said, let's take out your gallbladder. So it was just a routine gallbladder surgery. And when they went in, they saw that his liver was covered in cancer, and knew that it had metastasized from somewhere else. So they closed him up and then sent him straight to a bigger hospital at Roanoke to start cancer treatments and to kind of figure out everything. And from that day till the day he died was exactly 7 weeks. It was a whirlwind. It was incredibly difficult. My mom had MS. So she, when my dad wasn't in the hospital, he was at home with her. So she had an incredibly difficult time taking care of him. So it was really hard at the time because I was doing full-time teacher. And then I was also choir director for a church at that time. And I was, the way that the medicine would affect him and stuff, he would try to get up and try to do things in the hospital he shouldn't do. Mm-hmm. And so one of us from our family stayed with him all the time, but my mom couldn't.
Right.
So for most of those 7 weeks, I slept at the hospital with him. So I would go there right after school was out, and I would stay with him through the night and sleep there in the room. And then they were so nice there at the hospital. They would let me use a shower there, and I would get ready and go to work. And
so the impact was very, very great. Like, you were having to take care of all of the things, your dad, your mom, and while not missing work on a daily basis.
Yes. And trying to even pretend to be present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And because at the same, in all of that going on, I'm sure that inside you were just broken, very, very, very broken, because this is your hero. And, to see them in that state, I'm sure I have not had to experience that, but to see them and the deterioration, I'm sure, is just beyond.
Oh, yeah. Anything. To watch him wither away, because that's not.
He was strong to you. Yes.
That's not how he wanted to be.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, like you said, my trauma goes way back. And all of that centers around my mom. Mm-hmm. Or my mom is the center of that.
Right.
So my dad was my only safe place, really, from her.
Yes.
And I knew that I knew he took on a lot of her stuff for me. So, but I didn't realize the magnitude until after he was gone.
Yeah.
So now here's my mom who can't take care of herself.
Right.
And
that's let me lead into that too. So you lost your dad incredibly hard. Now losing both can just be unimaginable. I only know this just because, Trey he lost both of his parents as well. So we kind of touch on that sometimes, but tell me about the loss of your mom. How did that differ for you emotionally from your dad? Things like that.
Well, to be honest, if I may be quite frank, it was a relief.
Yes.
It was a relief.
Okay, and so if you want, maybe just give us a little background on your mom's passing. How did that happen?
Well, so I told you she had MS, but shortly after my dad had passed, she had always had some really bad back issues. but it was to the point where the bones were, she was hunched over and the bones were like wanting to come out of her skin. So it was awful. So we ended up doing a consult with a really great surgeon at UVA, and they did reconstruction on 18 inches from her neck to the very bottom of her spine.
Oh, wow.
It was like a 12 to 14-hour surgery. The recovery was brutal. And during that recovery, nothing I did was good enough. I mean, nothing. And I truly was doing everything that I could. And my husband just didn't understand. He's like, why are you putting so much time and effort into this person who treats you like this?
Right.
And, you know, like, because I'm from the South, baby.
Right?
It's what we do.
And no matter, you know, when you had mentioned the trauma or anything, no matter what, if that's your mom and that's what you're going to do. Yeah, I get that.
Yes. And so she oftentimes would compare the way that I was taking care of her with the way that I took care of my dad. And she was really jealous. But, you know, she also was in the hospital, in rehab from recovery in November and December. And for a choir teacher.
Oh, forget it.
Yeah. And a church musician.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God.
There's no time.
No, because you know, from November 1st till December 24th, you work like 24 hours a day. That's just the way it is. So then, okay, so finally she gets out of rehab. She goes home. She needs round the clock care. I'm not a nurse, and she needed round the clock care. I couldn't be there for her round the clock. So again, not good enough. She starts getting better. So that's, you know, after the new year. In October, I went and spent the night, took the boys. At that point I'd had Grant. Took him down to visit her, and she fell while we were there. And she ended up breaking her knee and her leg. So she goes back into rehab. And this time she was really close. She was just the next town over, and I could get to her in less than 15 minutes. And again, a lot of this is really blurry, if not.
Yeah, no, and that's our brains do that for a reason, right?
Right. Yeah. But in that time span, I was able to make amends with her in a lot of ways. And I remember it was a couple of days before she died, and she had gotten out of rehab and she was home, and I was making sure she got settled, and she said all the things to me that I had waited my whole life to hear. And I mean, it was a little too late.
Yep.
For a lot of it.
Yes.
But for some of it, it was divine intervention. And I remember I left and I went and sat in the car, and I just cried and cried because I knew that was the last time I was going to see her.
You just knew it.
I just knew it. And 2 days later, she had gone to visit her friend, and she just wasn't steady on her legs. And the car door, like she opened her car door and it came back on her because she was on a hill, and it knocked her down. And she hit the ground so hard that her brain immediately swelled. And I can't remember the word now, but like where it comes out from underneath the base of your skull. So she was basically dead on impact.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. Whew. That's a lot. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, no problem. Thus begins the journey of, you know, feeling guilty for being relieved.
Right. And so the amount of time in between your mom and your dad passing away was how many?
Less than 3 years.
Okay, less than 3 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So
About 2.5.
yeah. Okay. Um, and just so the audience knows, you are an only child.
Yes.
So you did not have any siblings. I know you had some family members that were close. Actually, were there for you and were really great for you. Did being that you were the only child, did you feel a particular kind of pressure or loneliness? Or like you had mentioned, guilt. And I know that is probably attached to other things too, but do you remember anything that you could just kind of share?
I think one of the things that stands out the most is to be, I guess I was 35. I was in my 30s and 37 at that point, and be like, I'm an orphan.
And I know because that's the first thing that Trey said to me. His mom passed away when he was 15, and then his dad, when he was what 40, 40 something, and that's the first thing he said. I'm an orphan. Yeah.
And it's, you're like, I'm a grown up,
Yeah.
obviously.
But it
That's
takes on a whole different meaning. Like it's just
well, the what could have beens
uh-huh.
are gigantic. They loom.
Yeah.
They
Yep.
loom over because my as much as I had trouble with my mom, she was, as a lot of parents are, a much different grandma than she was mother.
Okay.
Right. So she loved the boys very much. And my dad never knew Grant because he came along after the fact, and Aiden was 3 when he died. So I think the thing that really stands out to me and still does, is that the what could have been.
Yeah. Yeah.
And man, I wish my dad could have taught you this, or I wish
Uh-huh.
my mom could see that, or
Of course.
yeah, more so for my dad than my mom. But
Right. Just because you wanted him to be able to experience the love, that he could have for those kids. And while he did have some of that with Aiden, it was very short-lived. And
right.
Aiden was just starting to like grow and become who he is. And that, that's what we want. We want them to have that great relationship with their grandparents. So I totally get that.
Right. And my dad's dad passed away when I was a year and a half.
Mm.
So I never knew him. And so I kind of keep that in perspective. I never really was sad about that
Mhm.
because I didn't know him and then lose him.
Right.
But I always loved hearing
The
the
story.
stories. Yeah. So Aiden, thankfully, and Grant will never know how much they're missing.
Yeah. Yep.
That's my cross to bear.
Yeah, that's hard. That's really hard. Okay, so let's see. What you've touched on this a little bit, but what were some of the most challenging aspects of navigating life right after the loss? Like dealing with logistics,
Oh,
with the day-to-day living, the fact that you had 2 kids, you had a husband. So what were some of those things that were more challenging for you? And how did you kind of handle those and cope?
the hardest part was having to clean out the house.
I remember all of that. I remember us chatting a lot about that, and it was just very overwhelming for you.
It was very overwhelming, and I have to say my husband was so great with the whole, like, he got a storage unit, right? And he said, okay, listen, people are telling you, get rid, get rid, get rid.
Mhm.
And he was like, you do what you feel is right. And he
Yes.
said, if it's something that you're struggling to let go of, keep it.
Yep.
We've got a storage unit.
Yep.
And he said, a year from now, this will look different.
Yep.
2 years from now, this will look different. And he was like, I don't want you to get rid of anything that you're going to regret later on.
And that's really awesome advice, because when Kyle actually passed away, and I ended up selling my house,
Right.
because I just could not stay there. And the movers actually packed all of his stuff separately. And they just took it and they put it right in the attic of my new house. So that is like some of the best advice I think that you could have gotten, is that no, you move it from one place to another. You have to take care of this, but if you don't want to get rid, yeah. So that's really awesome.
I didn't know that about Kyle stuff.
Yeah, they just because I had no clue at that point what I was going to do with it. So they just packed it up separately, because that way I didn't have to see it on a daily basis, and I only unpacked my stuff and the stuff that I wanted out. Yeah.
Right. And then when you were ready.
And that was 3 years, 4 years. And I think that when I got married to Trey, I moved some of that stuff here. Yeah.
And that's okay.
And that's exactly what he said. So,
yeah. I mean, I went into it with the thought of, okay, if this has a memory attached to it,
yes,
right, then I'll keep it. But at that point, my dad had lost both of his parents. So I had a lot of stuff from them.
yes.
And then my mom had lost both of her parents.
So they did the same thing you were doing when they lost them. And so you were having to deal with all of the things.
Yes. And thankfully, my mom's brother, she only had one brother. He and his wife, my uncle Mike and my Aunt Judy have been, he's the executor.
Yes, I remember saying that.
Right. And bless his heart. He was the executor of my granddaddy, my mom, my dad, and my last living great aunt, and they all died within 4 years.
Oh, yes, bless him.
And then on my dad's side, there's only one brother and two cousins, and his brother died and my oldest cousin died, and that was all within 7 years. So I lost all but 2 of my blood relatives in 7 years. Yeah.
Wow.
That's a
lot. That is a lot. Oh my
God.
God.
A lot. But thankfully, back to what I was saying. Sorry.
Yes.
Thankfully, my mom's brother was able to take a lot of my granddaddy's stuff and my mom's stuff, and
okay,
so that I have it for later.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that was one of the challenging things.
Because I had a little baby.
Yeah. Yeah. And you had to go through this house. You had to sell the house, right?
Yeah. So I will say this, like, I know people say the Lord moves in mysterious ways, but so we had just found out that Grant was severely autistic, nonverbal, much more so than Aiden. Aiden is high functioning, but we knew what to look for, right? So we had just found out about that when my mom died, and there was no way I could help him with the way that he needed to be helped in work full time. I couldn't do it. And because my parents had saved and saved and saved and saved and saved and prepared for the future and insurance and the house, and I was able to quit work. We were able to pay off like our student loans and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I was able to quit. And I know that's exactly what they would have needed.
Of course. And and like you said, it does, it's, you don't ever quite know what or how it's going to happen, but it's, I don't even know the word. Yeah. Mysterious. I think that happened at that moment and you were able to do that, to be with Grant.
Well, and my dad had sacrificed so much. So my mom and dad both sacrificed so much so that my mom could stay home with me.
Mm-hmm.
And she eventually, went back to work when I was older.
Yeah.
But it was like, I don't know, it's melancholy.
Yeah. Well, the next question, it's talking about receiving support during these times. What kind of support did you find most helpful? And certain things that happened in order to make you kind of cope and feel like you were supported. I would say that kind of falls into the category just a little bit, right? You knew that there was something good to come from all of this, that you could stay home. But what were some other things, or any other support systems that you can really recall, if any, during this awful time?
Well, I mean,
Question.
friends, when you're an only child,
Yes.
you got your family.
Yeah.
You, Jill,
Mm-hmm.
Alicia, Angie, Taylor,
Mm-hmm.
my friend April, absolutely rocks. I give an enormous amount of credit to my aunt and uncle,
Mm-hmm.
and then my aunt Carolyn,
Mm-hmm.
who has always been like a second mom. She, sorry, I didn't expect to get so emotional.
Oh gosh, I did. I'm trying not to. This is hard. And
Yeah.
and that's why I'm so grateful that you're here, because other people hearing about these things are what, if they take one little bit from what you're saying today, that is going to give them a little bit of hope, because look at where you are now.
True.
And look at those relationships of the people that did surround you and they did help you, and then tell me more about your aunt that you said was like a mom.
Well, before I forget, I want to say this, if this is okay. I had started going to a group called MOPS, which is Moms of Preschool Age Children.
Yeah.
And it's through a church. And so I was new to not having a teaching schedule.
Yeah.
I have adult ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never been without structure. So I didn't have my teaching structure. I'm home with this infant. And so I'm already lost. I've got a whole house, and I don't want to get into the ADHD part of it, but like when you are overwhelmed, you shut down.
Yeah.
Right. And my husband also has ADHD. So he was not going to be any help in that department. Okay. So, because that too was like,
yeah,
this house is sitting and sitting and sitting, and I'm just paying the bills, right? It's too much. And I'll go to this MOPS meeting, and again, I would bet both my kidneys on eBay that this was meant to be. The message that day was, what is your purpose in this season? Because as moms, as women, caregivers, you are torn in 1,000 directions, and everything is a priority. Everything, right? There's 50 number ones. Mm-hmm. And so you got to rank them least flammable, and I was like, oh my gosh, that brought such clarity and such purpose to that time in my life. Mm-hmm. What is your purpose for this season? And I was like, my purpose is I need to get this house cleaned out.
Yeah.
I need to do it needs to be my job. And so 3 or 4 days a week, I packed us up in the morning and off to, with Phil we went. And it was my job. Now I could only do it like 2 or 3 hours a day because Grant was little.
Yeah.
And I had to make sure I got home to pick up Aiden from school, et cetera, et cetera. But in the end, we ended up getting that house sold just about 3 months before COVID hit.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
Talk about leaving teaching at the right time.
Oh, I know.
I got so lucky. Or was it luck? I don't know. But that was one of the, I wrote a couple of notes about things I wanted to share with your listeners. That was number one. Like when you feel like your head is a storm and you can't find your way, you can just stop and say, what is my purpose in this season?
I have never heard that, and I love that. I'm going to use that.
Oh, and the season lasts as long as you need it to last.
That's right. It's not forever.
No, it's not forever. And it has helped me get through some really hard times.
Yeah.
And while I'm giving out my advice.
Oh, we want it.
The other thing I actually wrote down so I wouldn't forget is to ask your parents a billion questions. Because I don't know how my parents met. I don't know. They told me like when I was a kid and I didn't care.
You're like, oh, yada, yada, yada.
Whatever. Ew, you kissed. Yuck.
Yeah.
I don't know. And thankfully my aunt and uncle have been able to fill in.
Oh yeah. Some of the
gaps for me. But so many questions that I don't have the answer to. And I have stories like when I was born and, that kind of stuff. But it's amazing how many, like, I don't know what my dad's first job was.
Right. Yeah.
And it doesn't seem significant until you can't know. Right.
Well, and so in talking about this, we know grief can change us, right? And this is just part of it. It says here, how do you think these experiences have shaped you, your outlook on life, relationships, and about yourself and when you die? And those are, that's just to touch on it a little bit, that those are things that you've thought about, that you want to make sure that your kids know. So what would you say is the biggest thing that it has helped shape you? Like who Davina is right now? How did, I guess, finding a purpose from this?
Yeah, well, my parents died in their early 60s. And I was like, that's it, man. My dad waited and waited and waited to do after he was retired.
You got to do now.
He was just a couple of years from retiring.
Yeah.
And I think I've shared this with you. Find your joy.
Yeah.
Which I stole from Gregisms on TikTok, but hashtag.
Well, Trey talks about it all the time, that his dad, he worked and he worked and he worked and he did everything to prevent from, getting this disease or that disease, or doing things to prevent from getting cancer. He got cancer and he wasn't even retired yet. He saved it, all these things, and then he died. And he was not able to do anything in what you're talking about with your dad. And I think that us losing, our parents younger, that really does stick with us. And like, wow, we've got to enjoy now, right?
And I would love to know if Trey feels this weight too, but like when your parents are gone, you're next.
Yeah. Oh, Yes, he oftentimes mentions, like, he's not really one to think, oh, I have this ailment, or what could it be? But he does I mean, not with his mom, because his mom was in a car accident, but with his dad, he's like, what if, then he thinks about his grandparents. One of them had dementia. And so he's like, he constantly is thinking, what am I going to get? And
Yep.
that is, he tries not to dwell on it, but sometimes it does consume him. And that's hard.
Oh yeah. I mean, my dad lost his dad. My pa was 55
Oh gosh.
when
Wow.
he died of a massive heart attack. So both my dad and his brother had a really hard time getting past that age
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they were both terrified.
Right. Yes. And that's, I think I've heard my dad speak to that a little bit as well, about his father passing away. So I know for you, you have made a lot of changes, like health wise and stuff for you. And has that come from all of this with your mom and dad?
Well, it took me a long time because I was taking care of people. I didn't get to grieve my dad
Right.
because I had to immediately go into caretaker mode for my mom. And I couldn't grieve him because not around her
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Okay.
And she had her own issues in that area. But so then she died, and then everything changes, and then there's autism, and then there's this, and then there's that, and then like finally I was like, a friend of mine, Taylor, sat me down. He was like, you gotta get a therapist. He said, I can listen all day long, but honey, you need a professional.
Okay, so quick therapy. A lot of people don't do it.
Oh,
They do what you and I did, and we just would call, and I need you just to listen to me. I'm even if I just sit here and cry, I just need you to listen to me cry. Like, and I have had many therapists, and we all know that it's finding the one that clicks, and
right.
so do you recommend that? Like, I mean, obviously, did you go get a therapist after Taylor said get one?
It took me a minute.
Yeah.
It did.
It's
Yeah. Well, and also, this could be a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
But in order to take care of my health,
Mhm.
to help me overcome that fear of dying young,
Yes.
I needed to trudge through a lot of years of trauma and grief. I mean, grief is just the most recent
Mhm.
of the things.
Well, and like you said, all of this is stemming back to childhood, and that is one thing that Trey found out too after his dad passed away, that everything currently happening or that had stemmed from that childhood trauma, right? And things and resentments and things that you have, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you are 100% therapy. Yes.
Oh, and medication too. Because let me tell you, and everybody's got to do their own journey. But when you're with the therapist and you find the one, and you are working through the things,
You have some major breakthroughs.
and no longer pushing it all down, it's okay to have a little buffer.
Yeah.
When you're feeling those feels, because it's big.
Yeah.
It's really big. And so, it turns out I needed to deal with a lot of trauma to start being able to deal with my own personal health.
Yes. Right. Because we 100% know that that's what part of our health issue is the trauma. It lives in us, right?
Yes.
So in order to tackle that, you do have to really dig deep and figure out the root of all that.
Right.
And,
Which I had used food to cope.
right. But
And
now you're on an amazing journey.
I'm working on it.
Are on an amazing journey. Okay, so you took the support from everyone, you got a therapist, and after you could tackle thing by thing, right? Whatever that season was for you, you eventually got to this point where you can now start to think about taking care of you and
Yes.
digging deep in all of that, which is amazing. Amazing. And
Thank
I
you.
know I don't really like to say this because people would say it to me all the time. You just don't know how strong you are. Well, I don't have any other thing to be other than strong, right? That's so I know that, but I do want you to know and that I have watched this journey unfold for you, and you simply are a rock star.
Oh, thank you.
And
Thank you.
this is going to be like, this episode is crazy, crazy good. I don't know. I think you've already touched on this, finding your sense of purpose for a new direction. Like, I don't know. Do you want to elaborate on that? Because I know you, at the beginning, you said you're an advocate now. You are highly involved in that autism world because of your boys. Um, you're on this health journey right now. So I think I feel like everything, even though you had these incredible losses, you know, even you going back to saying you actually were financially okay to quit your job so you could invest in your kids, and the fact that they had autism, these are all things about purpose in
Right.
loss, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you want to touch on that?
Well, and since this is a grief podcast, again, a
Well, it's
whole other
all
episode.
trauma, grief, anything. So,
There has been for other, if you have other listeners who have kids with special needs who have not done therapy, because it's a whole separate kind of grief.
well, and I would love to do that too, because that's a life-changing adversity, right? You never thought in a
Oh
million
yeah.
years that when you had your kids that they would both have autism. That is
Oh
a
no. Yeah.
unknown territory.
And you have to, I mean, you have to grieve the life you thought you'd have, the kids you thought you'd have. Uh, and I honestly, until I got my therapist, did not realize that some of the problems I was having was because of that grief.
Oh,
I had no idea.
oh.
I would go through these really dark
Mhm,
days at a time. I called it the black box.
mhm.
I would just go there. And then she was able to make me see through therapy, like how to handle the circumstances around those black box days. So that, and I haven't been back since.
Wow. You know,
Yeah.
and like with my grief, and you know, they talk about the waiting room, and that's where the grief is, and I stayed there for a really long time. And so I think maybe that's kind of like what your black box is, right? It's a place where you house everything, you go there, but you were living there.
And once you can kind of see that, like, I brought this softball, just my dad's softball to show you. So this is your grief.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't get smaller.
Yeah.
No, but your world gets bigger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so when you kind of, because even now I'm like, you know, grief is sneaky.
Oh, say that again.
You're driving down the road and you see a bird, and all of a sudden you're bawling for 10 days. And like,
You need to visit me. Yes. I know it's you. What are you telling me? Yeah.
yeah. So instead of being like, what is wrong with me? Why have I not moved on?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because this is your grief.
Yeah. And so
Your
you
life
have
just gets
to
bigger.
embrace it, right? It's so hard and complex until you actually like learn about it. And it is a crazy thing.
When you give yourself permission
Mhm.
to sit in that space. It changes so much. When you're like, oh, I'm feeling some kind of way,
Yeah.
and instead of pushing it back down or pressing on, you take a minute and you take a breath and you just breathe. It's space. Whenever I'm with my therapist, her name is Carla. I'm like, oh, you Carla'd me real good, because she'll say something and it just, clicks. And when that happens, it feels like the space
Yeah.
opens up in my chest, and I'm like, okay. And you can, and sometimes I have to acknowledge it. I don't know what is there. I don't know what's making me feel, without sounding cliche, but triggered.
Yeah. Mhm.
But I take note
Yeah.
and I notice it, and I give myself grace and space
Yeah.
to feel that, and it makes my entire mental health better.
I think that what you just said is it resonates with me that you allow yourself, now you allow that space to come and go and you just sit with it. And I think for me, because I had, that traumatic event in my life happen at such a young age,
Mm-hmm.
and that I did move forward, right? And so I don't think I ever allowed myself to sit in that space. I'm 25. I got remarried. I had kids, and now I am 19 years later, and I am allowing myself to sit in that space. And you earlier brought up grief, and I think for years I had guilt. Well, and you always think about the people looking in on you, and if they're judging you, and if you're doing things right. I remember you called me one time and you said, I just need to ask you this question. And you asked me the question and you said, I need to know if this is okay if I do this. And I said, it is totally okay. I don't know if you remember what I'm talking about. I'll tell you offline, but I don't want to. But I said it is totally okay for you to do whatever you think is necessary for you.
For
I'm
you.
the best at giving that advice, right? But I didn't do it myself. And so I love that you said you have to just be in that space and allow yourself, because I never did that. I don't think. I don't think I ever did that. So that is super powerful and valuable for everybody listening, that it is okay for you to be in that space and
Mm-hmm.
you to stay there. I learned the waiting room from Christina Rasmussen, which is a famous author. I actually met her on a retreat one time, and that's where I learned about the waiting room. And when she said that is a place for you to go, it is a place for you to remember, but you can't live there. You've got to come out and you've got to live life, and you have to have joy, and you have to surround yourself with those things. It will never go away. So I think that's beautiful that you said that in that way. That's really awesome.
Grace, give yourself grace to take the space. You
Yeah.
got to have grace on yourself.
And this is the thing, we give endless grace to other people.
Yeah.
Why can't we do it and we're two, women in, a certain stage of life right now, and we should know that we have to give ourselves grace, right? I mean, we can sit there if our kids having a bad day. Oh, well, they're just having a bad day. We're not allowed, right? We're not
No.
bad day. But I think it's all on us. It's what we tell ourselves, right? Just maybe one or two more, and then we'll try and wrap up this episode. I don't want to. It could
We
go.
could talk forever.
I know we could, and that's why I know I'm going to have you back on. Okay, one thing. Looking back, do you wish you had known anything differently about the grief or losing someone? Is there anything you would have done differently? I know that's a hard one.
I mean, I certainly would have gotten help quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just so much quicker.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
But the truth is that when it happens, and if it's the first time, you don't know, you have absolutely no clue what
well,
to do.
because I wanted to run away from it, not towards it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
19 years later, right?
I know it is. I just, I'm writing a book. And so I wrote, all I wanted to do at that time was just stay in the bottom of his closet and just think that I was in a nightmare and wish that it would just go away. There was no way that I could tackle it head on.
I was at your house when you did that.
Oh,
Because your mama said, she's in the closet.
yeah.
It was awful.
That's awful. But that's the thing you said. You run from it and you pick the places that feel safe to you at that time, and you don't know. My mom said, Angie, you've got to get help. And I said, I will not get help. I will not get help. I'm going to be fine. She goes, no, you will get help. And eventually I did. And I found, just like you, I found the best therapist. And she told me all the things I was doing was okay, most of them, and just allowed me to be who I needed to be at that point. So getting therapy sooner was one. I don't know. I feel, just in talking to you, I don't feel like you have many things that you wish you would have done differently.
No, I mean, it all just kind of played out in the way, well, I don't want to say the way it should have, but I think I started my therapy journey at just the right time for my developmental stage. I finally was in my 40s, and there is such a freedom that comes with turning 40, where I just like, I'm like,
I love that you love that.
I love it. I loved being like, if you don't like me, I do not care.
That's true. Yes.
I have lived 40 some years on this planet, and
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that I know what I know.
Uh-huh.
I'm happy to admit when I don't know. I can look it up if I don't know it.
And look at all the things that you have experienced and you have gone through.
I have wisdom now,
Yeah.
and perspective, and although I wish my body didn't feel like it was in its 40s, I will gladly take the peace of mind that has come with age.
Yeah. That's a great way of looking at it.
Oh my gosh. I wish there was a way to give even a tiny bit of the kind of perspective you have as an adult to your kids when they're younger and going through.
Oh yeah. Right.
I mean, Benjamin Button had it right, living life backwards. I mean, if you could take all the stuff you know now and like work backwards with it, man, how things would be so different.
Yeah. Okay. So, two things. Is there a certain way that you keep your parents' memory alive?
Yes, my children.
Yeah. Yeah. You constantly talk to them about them.
Oh,
okay.
Every word that comes out of my son's Aiden's mouth, I'm like, you know who you sound like.
Gotcha.
I know exactly who you sound like, because I sound just like him and you sound just like me.
Yeah.
I mean, with Grant, it's a little different. He doesn't really have an understanding. But oh my gosh, it's kind of just special for me. There's certain ways that Grant will look at me.
Mm-hmm.
As my dad would say, it's a shit-eating grin.
Yeah. Yeah.
And oh my gosh, Grant looks just like him.
Oh.
And my dad was so mischievous.
Mhm.
And
That's what he is.
my Aunt Carolyn said sometimes it's like your daddy is in heaven, just pulling strings to watch the
Oh,
show.
I love that. Oh, that's really awesome. That's really awesome. Okay.
You know, my sign with my dad was always a double rainbow, and they don't come around as often as they used to.
Mhm.
But I swear to you, they still come when I need them.
He knows you're okay. He knows you're okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and
But
um,
that moment that they do, I'm sure, and you just stop and you think about it, it's pretty dang amazing.
oh yeah, and there are certain times with certain sunsets, I don't say a word, and Aiden will say he'll look up. We could be driving or just outside in general, and it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, oh, it's beautiful. He'll look up and he'll say, "That's Pawpaw saying hi."
Oh,
There's something about the sky.
I tell you what, I do believe that those kids, they know. I think I truly believe that.
Shortly after my dad died, I walked by Aiden's room again. He was 3.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was always a blue collar worker, construction, electrician, could build anything, fix anything. And right, like almost immediately after my dad died, my oldest son became obsessed with construction.
Mm.
Like obsessed. And when you have autism, that looks like obsession.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking equipment, books. He knew all the things, what they did,
Wow.
right? And I walked by his room maybe just a couple weeks after my dad died, and he was sitting in his floor playing with his construction trucks. He was just looking up and just talking and talking. And I said, "Who are you talking to?" "Pawpaw."
Oh,
I said, "Okay,
keep talking.
keep talking." Yeah.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
if I hadn't lived through that, I'd be like, "That's a little crazy."
Right? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But we all know, because that's, like Kyle became my God. He that is who I talk to more than anyone probably. So that's just oh, gives me chills. Okay, to wrap up, what is one message that you would give to our listeners about any of this? Loss, healing, moving forward, awful, tragic event of both of your parents passing away, your childhood trauma, anything. What's something that you would leave them with?
That's tough.
It is tough, I know. You said a lot of really, really good things, and a lot of things that I think that they can take from it. But if there was just one little nugget,
Lean in, lean in to your people. And I was afraid of being too much, but if they're really your people, they're gonna hold you up
they will. They
and
will.
even give you good advice, like find a therapist.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes your friends will come to your mom's funeral and you say, "Go get those sparkly things off her casket. They'll look good on my Christmas tree." And everybody in their high heels and their black dresses and their suits are crawling all over the hole, trying not to fall into the ground, picking those sparkly things off of her casket spray so I could put them on my Christmas tree. And I still do.
Oh my gosh. Oh my.
But lean in to people and don't be afraid of being too much, because there's no right way to grieve.
Well, there's not.
There's no right way, no wrong way. Give yourself grace to sit
Yeah.
in whatever space you're in.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh, this was so amazing.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, is there anything anything that we can do for you, this community. Like, I know that you talked about, and I would love to have you back on, maybe to dive more into the autism aspect with you and your boys. And I know that you said you're highly involved with the autism community and you got some things in the works. So maybe we keep in touch with you and see where that goes and how we can support one another, you in this community, and then kind of what you're working on your end.
Well, it's been very easy to advocate because with both kids,
Mm-hmm.
in the system, well, IEP,
Yeah.
school stuff, I've been learning as I go.
Yeah.
And I even have a lot of parents ask me to consult even on their kids' IEPs and stuff, which I feel like a major, imposter syndrome there because I'm still learning.
Yeah, but you've done a lot of work in that arena, right? And so just when you talk to me, the wealth of knowledge that you have is, and that's like, I think that, my coach, he says to me, but, Angie, you are an expert in what you're doing, right? And I'm like, no, I'm not. And he goes, you've been living it. You've lived this. You totally know what you're talking about. And I think that's right there with you too. So I commend you for that and in learning all those things and doing everything that you do for your kids.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And I commend you for what you're doing. I am loving every bit of your second act.
Well, thank you. And you, Davina, are going to be on this journey for much longer. I know that you have, just for the audience to know, Davina has been just an amazing friend to me, has actually been one of those that sat on the phone and listened to me cried or held me while I cried. And just the amount of things that you and I have been through together is, and she said, don't be afraid to be too much, because those people, they will stick around and they will be there to support you. The ones that won't, they won't be there. And you will 100% find yourself down another path without those people. And that's okay, because they're for a season too, right?
They're for a season.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's not a sad thing to me anymore. It's kind of a beautiful thing.
It is. And I listen, it's taken a long time for me to understand that too, right? That, because you grieve that too, the fact that those people didn't come along with you on your journey, but that's okay. They're not meant to. So yeah, only the good ones stay. All right. Well, Davina, once again, thank you so much for being on this episode of Resilience Reborn. And we are so glad that all of you were here listening on this episode and that you were able to be in the space with us today. And just thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us on the Resilience Reborn podcast. We hope today's stories provided you hope and inspiration to always be resilient.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing to our channel. You can also interact with us on our Facebook community page, which you can find by searching Resilience Reborn on Facebook.
Remember, through resilience and recovery, you are never alone. Together,
we grow stronger. See you next time.